Okay, everyone, we might get going. Welcome. Thanks for making the time this afternoon to attend the first in a series of three workshops, which we hope will be extremely productive, looking at crop mapping across Australia. My name's Stuart Finn. I'm based at the University of Queensland and work with Earth Observation Australia, as well as the SmartSat Cooperative Research Centre. I'll be one of the presenters today, and Professor Andrew Robson from the University of New England is going to be the other presenter today. Just going to do an appropriate welcome, a little bit of housekeeping, and then we'll get into what we're trying to achieve for today. So just a reminder again, if you are having difficulties with audio, it might be good to use the phone-based link up as shown on the slide there. And can we just make sure our microphones are on mute and our cameras are off to begin with. So before we do begin, I do want to take a moment to make sure we acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands and waters we meet across Australia and pay our respect to their elders past and present, and also acknowledge the future generations and the roles that they are going to play in working with us and looking after and managing our landscapes and communities. So just in terms of what we're going to cover today and a little bit of housekeeping, this is a jointly enabled series of workshops, which is going to be delivered through, I guess, three different, types of sessions, which we're going to run over the next, today and the next 2 days. So today we're going to be looking at an overview of what is involved in crop mapping in terms of capabilities across industry, government, education, and research institutions, look at some of the challenges and how we can potentially move forward in terms of cooperating. Tomorrow we'll look at how the different crop classification products are used by a broad range of groups. And then on Friday, look at how we potentially move forward in terms of linking the groups that produce these types of products and services to the users of them, as well as linking the research that goes on, whether it's in government, industry, and universities, and how that helps push it all forward for us together. So just in terms of logistics, we are recording today, so everything you see and hear and also that goes into the chat window is going to be recorded, and we'll make that available to participants afterwards. We would ask that people do keep in mind that we are trying to have productive, constructive discussions. This is an Earth Observation Australia event. We do have a code of conduct around how we run our meetings, which I can refer to later if needed. I also do want to acknowledge that this is partly supported by the Earth Observation for Government Network, which is a program that looks at how we link research which is going on in universities, industries and other government agencies to support government provision of Earth observation products and services as well. So the aims of the workshops and the series of workshops is to build collectively an understanding of what we're doing as a community in terms of being able to map cropping systems over the entire country, but also down to the within farm scale. And the reason that we're doing this is to try and establish a more coordinated set of activities that will enable all the different communities that are doing crop mapping to work together more effectively to develop and deliver services. And that's everything from accessing data sets from satellite data streams, field data sets, other data sets, how we access algorithms and validate them, and then actually move forward as well. Because the aim is to help everybody to do what they're doing more effectively. It's not to try and silo things in that sense. So here's the outline for today. We've been through the welcome and acknowledgement. Housekeeping, we're going through it at the moment. I think the other point with housekeeping, if you are having technical challenges, please type them into the chat window and we'll attempt to address them. If you have questions or comments along the way, please type them into the chat window and we'll try and come back to them. But we are going to have quite an extensive amount of time for discussion amongst us, particularly in response to the feedback that you've given us to the pre-meeting survey. I really want to thank everybody for doing that and spending time and sharing openly about that as well. And just in concluding housekeeping, if things do go wrong at our end of getting things going, we'll try and get them up again as soon as possible. So having said all of that, the last point is we are going to produce outputs, and another outcome is going to be us working together. And so we'll talk about how to do that at the end of today. So I'm just going to hand over now to Andrew Robson from University of New England to talk about the background to the workshop. And thank you to Andrew for providing these amazing photoshopped images of us. Okay, Andrew, go for it.
Thank you, Stuart, very much. Yeah, first of all, reiterating, thank you very much for all those that attended. We have a really wide demographic from federal and state government to universities to commercial agencies and a number of industry representatives. So I think that really supports the interest in doing this and understanding of the information and the benefit of this data system or data we're trying to compile. So, I mean, you're all here, so you know that commodity mapping is very important from the national to the block level. For us, it involves, it instigates or supports innovation. So there's a lot of value-adding ability from this information. It also improves Australia's competitiveness if we're working together and across industries, and also improve resilience to biosecurity and natural disasters. So crop mapping is occurring. So this is not a brand new idea that's just popped up now. Group like ACLUMP and state agencies have been doing it for many years. And so, again, so this is not stating the obvious. It's happening for a long time. However, there is continuity between a number of the mapping products that are happening at the moment. There is slight competition. There are industries that are not currently being included. There's differences in temporal and spatial resolution, accuracy matrix, and also the ability or the opportunity to engage industry a lot better. So we also have the opportunity to use this data to build on the following down the value chain. So that's things like transport, logistics, all sorts of things. I mean, building this layer is the very starting point of what we can create. And I think you're all very aware of that need or that option. So part of it, we can do this, and it has been being done to some degree. It's really important that we ensure that the industries are engaged, and also we respect the data that's being compiled and provided. We really don't want a repeat of the Aussie farm map that happened quite a few years ago, where a lot of information, which was freely available, but was put out there, and unfortunately the data layer was used for bad, not good. The negative impact on industry trust and industry sentiment and support of this was damaged. So part of this discussion is to make sure the industries are involved as best as possible and that data is respected and their privacy respected. So as I said before, there's a lot of groups currently doing bits and pieces of this around Australia. So this whole discussion is about how can we build on that expertise that's currently going. There's no intention at all to reinvent the wheel or to replace anyone that's in their spaces at the moment. There's some really fantastic examples, such as as I said, there was an ACLUMP before, but we've got Continuum have been working with the wine industry for a while. We've got data farming and that system in grains that are doing some really nice products. We've got Cyber Labs, which are doing a lot in pastures. and quite a others that have actually raised their hand to be involved with this. I think when we get to the third day, when we discuss about a way forward, we can really iterate some opportunities, particularly for that commercial end, where they can be a part of this appropriately in terms of, you know, not getting pushed out. So that's not the intention. They play a crucial part at the front end. So we want to make sure all is represented and all is covered. So I think that's enough from me in terms of the background. There's plenty more comments that can be made, but I'm just reiterating it is a collaborative approach. So if we move on to the next slide. Now, Stuart's got the controls. He took them off me. It's like when you sit there and watch TV and the dad of the house takes them. Oh, he's gone back to us. Oh, I'm not doing that.
I just wanted to just highlight, you know, that the next part is, you know, we're going to go through, and I realise I didn't do this before, the survey results, just a quick synopsis to share that with everyone, and then to go through a discussion of that in terms of a number of key aspects of it and what's come up. And the aim is to then have a wrap-up discussion just towards the end of it, where we've got some suggested ways of potentially moving forward. And just the last bit of context there is, you know, we are working in an area where the data sources are changing quite rapidly. Our ability to access and use them, produce products, to validate them, and then to distribute them is also changing quite significantly all the time. So we need ways of keeping up with that. So yeah, we are going to end up at where do we go next for this. Sorry, Andrew, that was my bad. I'm not explaining those things before.
I'll take the controls off you.
Yeah, okay.
So I can't see exactly how many joined today. My thoughts or the update from Georgia and Larissa, I think. Sorry, Stuart?
I think there's probably about 55, 56 people have joined in addition to us.
Oh, okay. Well, that's really impressive, first of all, considering this was only sort of floated very a short time ago. From that, we had quite a few who contributed to the surveys, and I'm sorry that we had surveys. I know they're a pain, but hopefully we made them not too painful. The responses were really interesting, and at the very least, the fact that it was an opportunity to collate some of this information, and that was happening at the moment, who the groups were, and some of the issues and concerns that are currently happening is going to be a really good outcome from these workshops. So the slide we've got there at the moment this is the survey participants. So if you don't see your name there, it's because you didn't do a survey, just saying. So we have a number of federal and state government agencies on the left-hand side. We had a couple of universities that contributed in the middle. But what was really encouraging is, again, quite a number of commercial groups contributed to this. And again, their role in this, and all our roles in this, is important that we get this right. So great to see. If you want to flick on, Stuart, please. So this is the list that was provided in the surveys of the current providers. As you can see, there is quite a lot of commercial and state agencies providing information at the moment for different industries, and we'll detail some of those industries in a minute. Some of the links are available there, so when you get a copy of this later, I encourage you to go through and look at each of the products, because there is some really fantastic ones amongst it. There's a few that haven't provided links yet, and I'm sure in the post-discussion there's the opportunity to provide them then. There's also been a few others that have reached out in the week that haven't had a chance to include in the survey. So as we receive more entries, we'll add them. We haven't opened it widely to the international. Like some of you are aware, there's some international agencies who are currently mapping crop types in Australia. We want to, in the first instance, make sure we sort of support the collaboration within Australia. So that's why some of the international ones aren't included. So I won't go through them all. I think it's better for you to have a look through a later date and have a flick through the links where possible. So Stuart, if you're happy to flick on again. So we did ask what sort of resolution was currently being mapped with the products. Was it, you can see, was it agricultural, not agricultural? And then down to specific commodities, or whether it was just like a summer pastures and winter pastures and things like that. Again, the contribution of this survey is really interesting. So you can see the responses there is a split in what's provided back. For each of these questions, we've tried to pull out a main observation out of it. Feel free to point out any of the main points we've missed, but in the discussion section, everyone has the opportunity to back that up. But what we found is that predominantly there is a lot of mapping happening to the commodity level. And if you go to the next slide, Stuart, we've actually listed all the different types of crops that are currently being mapped at the moment. And it's really impressive. As I said, it's a lot of groups doing some fantastic stuff. So one thing's been, we identified there is obviously some industries that are missing that need to be included, and that's part of this discussion, is to identify how we can better service those industries. Also, there's obviously differences in resolution. So ones are grouped more collectively, like intensive horticulture and modified pastures and things like that, and then down to that individual commodity. So the integration of those data sets is something that we hope to better link up, and that would be down from sort of that pointy end, working with specific industries right up to the ACLUMP data, and having the ability to feed information back up and down that chain. So there's lots there. So again, have a look at this later. I'm not going to read them all out. There was a response of ABP CC codes. Apologies, I wasn't sure and didn't have time to Google that. So if there's elaboration on that, please feel free to add. Next one, please, Stuart.
The valuation codes, Andrew. Matt Miles from South Australia here, like the property valuation classifications.
Thank you very much for clarifying that. Excellent. Okay, so the next one we got is mapping scales. So we're interested on the products that are being done now, how many actually covered national, state, regional, down to individual crops. And again, a really good spread of the responses that came in. Again, I think the important bit that came out of this is that it is occurring at a range of levels depending on the commodity. And so again, there is the opportunity to build on the linkages with those different products, creating the opportunity to include that paddock to farm level, that paddock to state level mapping product. Again, I won't spend too much. Hopefully the graphics explain enough, and you can visit them later. Stuart, if you want to go to the next one, please. So there's a range of data sets, and this was really encouraging that it's not just heavily loaded onto a certain approach to develop these mapping products. There is strong engagement and use of existing government layers, and that's a really good pat on the back for the state agencies and federal agencies for the layers that they've been producing for years and years. They are really essential base maps for understanding temporal change, back for a long time. So the fact that people are building and value adding this does demonstrate that this sort of collaborative approach does have legs to stand on. Industry data is a really important one. We know with our own experience ourselves that having the industries engaged is crucial, particularly for things like, well, in our case, tree crops. New planting of trees is very difficult to differentiate, and some of these industries are growing by the seconds. Mass planting, talking 1,500 hectares a year of sort of macadamias in the Bundaberg area alone. So massive transition of land, of crop typing. So having the industry engaged in this process to help validate and provide information to this is critical. So is on-ground validation, whether it's with industry participants or whether it's the map makers themselves or independent services offering ground validation information. And I think that's a really crucial part to play in putting this together, is maybe looking at how we can put even a value on that. So those that are providing on-ground validation of information, and that's whether it's just barley or cotton or whatever, whether they're actually some currency exchange for that information, because it is critical for all of us to get that right. Remote sensing is obviously a vital tool for doing this, and the explosion of machine learning has been really interesting to see the outcomes it's created. But what's really encouraging is that it's placed here as a component of other options. So that's really important. So there's a few other minor responses there, but the main takeaway from that is really encouraging that we're not heavily reliant on one process alone. So there's greater chance the accuracies are right. Okay, I might chuck it over to Stuart. Sorry, I'm professional speak. I may pass it now over to Stuart to carry on with so we don't have to hear me all the time.
Thanks very much, Andrew. And yeah, just also thanks to people like Sebastian who pointed out where there's like errors in the slides, which we'll pick up and make sure we fix. Look at the product update frequency responses. It was primarily on an annual basis, and then really just a jump down to quite high frequency repeats on a daily or weekly basis. So yeah, there is a dominant, I guess, supply of information there at a certain spatial scale and temporal scale. But this is also something we need to look at in relation to the type of crop and type of activity that it's being used for as well. So not as much variety there, but that was interesting. The answer to the next questions was quite interesting, and it relates to something that Andrew's just touched on as well. It was really good to see a wide variety of validation methods there. But we didn't get into a lot of detail here in terms of what those methods are, how replicable they are, a whole range of things in terms of why they're actually being done. I mean, some of them range from opportunistic capture of information to highly extensive, systematic and regular surveys to check the agreement between what's on the ground and what's actually being mapped or estimated, the inclusion of information from other people in terms of on-ground sort of landholders providing information as well. If we step aside from here and look at the general use of Earth observation and remote sensing, this is still one of the worst done areas scientifically and professionally in terms of people being clear and open about how they've done it, what they've done, and how accurate products or estimates actually are. And okay, from a science point of view, it's critical for developing and getting algorithms right. Obviously, from a product use point of view, it's critical as well for people deciding whether they use things or not. It is an activity that can take a lot of time and money, and it is something that I guess from what we've seen so far in the survey, it is an area where potentially if we're collaborating across industry, government and universities, this may be an area where we can collaborate effectively and help people. So validation is being undertaken, but there's a wide variety of methods, whether they're replicable or appropriate or sufficient, that's another question. Andrew sort of summarised a key point there, and I don't know the answer to this. Andrew and I don't know the answer to this. The question is there an opportunity to standardise for establishing a national product? So that's something we'll come back to in the discussion. I would also put a point out that there's going to be 5 or 6 different versions of different products out there now. We see it with vegetation mapping, you will have seen in the media last week about difference between national and state and territory levels. So there's going to be different products, and diversity of approaches are good, but how do you decide which one is fit for each agency's use? So something to come back to later on. Yeah, I don't know, Andrew, maybe one of the points we do want to bring up is, is there a one-size-fits-all product? I'm not saying there is or there isn't. I don't know. We'll come back to it. Okay, 9, which is looking at the data formats used and also metadata, which is used as well. And again, this was interesting, like the validation approaches. There's a range of different data formats that are used in terms of file formats for distributions, some of which enable people to use the data directly in, essentially whatever their work systems are, whether they happen to be open access systems or proprietary systems. Some of the products are produced in a way that they can be ingested automatically and drive, people building other services from them as well. There's probably less information about metadata than we probably would have liked to have seen in there, in terms of people being aware of what detailed information they're supplying with their products and services as well. So I think if you look at this particular response, you had responses from the people who are producing land cover cropping products, and slightly different responses from people using them as well. So again, this gets into the question of, is there a generic, standardized approach, or is there, specifications for what the data set should actually meet to be used? I think if you look at what's happening with online data processing of satellite imagery, looking at spatial temporal and image archives, cloud optimized geotiffs, and all of the metadata that's associated with them, we're moving more and more towards these interoperable spaces. Licensing, this had a variety of responses depending on whether you were producing a product or service which was open access and available for everyone to build on, or whether it was a product or service which was fee for service access. So the licensing and costing varied around that, and we appreciate everybody sharing as much as they could on that as well. This will come back for discussion later on, particularly fundamental data layers or fundamental products that everyone can use and build on. How do we make those available and usable, and make sure the people who produce them also receive appropriate credit for doing it? So there's nothing standard there. Pricing structure, this did vary for the range of commodity mapping, crop type approaches. Some of it was open, some of it was on a variable scale subscription basis, some of it was case by case or on a contract by contract basis. Some people operate at a property level in terms of providing those. But again, there was a lot of variability given the range of different uses that were being met with them. In terms of limitations and challenges, this is really good because there were a range of different responses, but there was a certain amount of commonality amongst some of them as well. And that's one of the real benefits of this type of exercise. We've been through similar exercise in other communities that are producing, satellite imagery-based products, whether it's land cover classification or looking at vegetation properties. And as a community, being able to say, we all need these type of data sets, or we need access to this sort of common base information, is very powerful and helps drive the communities forward to lobbying for access to those and making changes so that each group can do the development work that's required, government can provide the services required, and ideally industry can build on top of those as well, and everybody's research is there. So just to highlight a couple of those, one of the things that came up commonly was awareness within the different industries of what was required to produce these sorts of products and potentially how and why they could be used. That there is a challenge in interacting between businesses and governments, particularly in terms of developing research and going to implementing that operationally as well. Cost and access, particularly to high spatial resolution imagery that's collected consistently as well. Access to ground-based information on a consistent basis as well. And also the ability to link between field measurements and image measurements both accurately and precisely, which is critical for validation, was identified. There's also, in a number of cases, a challenge identified where you've got potentially publicly funded groups doing work, ideally, which could be done in private industry, and no ability to pull that apart effectively, so that we can have a more effective link of research and development work in the different areas, and having it move to a point where it can be developed and actually built up as well. So this is going to be one of our main areas for discussion in terms of what can we tackle and actually move forward on that. Concerns, the main one, I think, which comes out of what I was just talking about, was the competition between providers in different communities. I mean, competition and diversity is healthy to a certain extent, but we can ideally look at that in another way, which is it should also drive productivity and our ability to address crop mapping challenges more effectively as well. And I will acknowledge that the challenge of going from publicly funded groups, whether it's institutions or universities who are doing work, working with government and working with industry, linking those three things up is not necessarily something that we have done well, not just we, this community, but across, in an Australian context, it's been quite challenging. And when you do start to try and push things in that area, it is something that we need to make sure we get better at and understand how to do it more effectively, and use models which potentially have worked better overseas, which enable more effective industry university partnerships or research institution partnerships, and then government to industry. There's not one magic solution, but we need to talk about it openly and be able to pull it apart so that we can work effectively together to do those things. And intellectual property is tied into that, particularly when our commercialisation activities or research to commercial activities through programs like cooperative research centres or Australian Research Council programs have very restrictive IP arrangements in terms of background IP and moving forward. So this is something we need to look at it openly and come up with the best ways to go forward. So I think concerns and limitations are going to be a focus of what we're doing. Benefits. This was one where everybody had generally a lot to say here, apart from one or two people. But it's that, okay, recognising collaboration takes time, building relationship takes time, but seeing how other people are doing what you're doing trying to build different parts of your activity in association with other groups, making sure as a community we've got access to fundamental enabling data sets is also, we're seen as one of the main benefits here. For the government agencies and private industries to build the crop mapping capabilities they have, they've got to have some common base data sets which are going to be made consistently available and accessible over time, whether it's from government or whether it's from online cloud-based data providers as well. So in general, everybody agreed collaboration was going to affect and help a range of different activities in our development, production and delivery of services. Okay, I'm going to stop there for a second. Andrew, I covered a fair few slides there. Were there any other points you wanted to add in terms of clarification and other things you think we need to focus on?
Only a couple of things, Stuart. Thank you very much. So in terms of the competition side of it, I mean, we don't expect that all parties will provide you just one great product and that's everyone's locked into that. Everyone has their own agendas and markets and products they're already developing. I think all we're really looking at is the opportunity to contribute to one generalised product, which would maybe as simple as just this is a cotton, this is avocado, which is available for all to build upon. So finding a common ground on that base layer would be an ideal outcome for this. And that would tick a lot of those further uses for biosecurity and logistics and all that stuff as well. What you're doing in your own spaces beyond that, hopefully this layer can help benefit what you're doing for your own markets. So in terms of competition, yeah, we're not expecting everyone to come and link hands and wear daisy chains. We understand that you'll have respective businesses. In terms of the collaboration side, on the other side of that, it was really encouraging. Again, the fact that there's so many people here today, but also the responses, there really is a common thread that pulling this together to some degree, there's a lot of interest and a lot of support for it. So I think we're starting off a really good foot to move forward. I think that's it, Stuart, in terms of, sorry if that was a little bit cumbersome getting through those survey results, but I thought it was important, or we thought it was important that we reflected the responses of the community in this, not what we think is happening. And I think the survey, even though there was 20 odd people, still provided a good snapshot across the community. So now I think, Stuart, are we going to give people a chance to have a break for a minute, or are we going to move straight? Yes, sorry, go.
Yeah, I just thought we have been sitting down and listening for a little while now, mate. What we usually do is quick break for 5 minutes now, and we will come back and restart with a targeted discussion around what we presented, with an aim to moving towards, okay, how do we actually move forward collectively in this space as one of the outputs and outcomes for today. And the other thing just to highlight is, the survey results, we will provide those in an online report, which will enable everyone to access afterwards as well. Okay, so yeah, 5 minutes from now. So yeah, probably like 10 to the hour for those of you who are not half an hour off. So basically Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, yeah, if you're in NT and SA, 20 past, I think. I don't want to, so 5 minutes. Okay, shut up.
And please put in some questions in that time. As we've stated down there, this is your opportunity to add to that discussion. And the points we've raised, if we've missed anything, yeah, it's your chance. So please add them there, type them in, or put your hand up and we'll get back to them after the break.
Basically follow on set of questions from this as well. And also after today's meeting, we'll just confirm where we are going to put the recording for today and the survey results. So it's in an easiest to access spot as well. All right, Andrew, are you happy if we start looking through questions and then just go through some of those key points there? Okay. All right. And just while we're doing that, I do want to acknowledge Georgia Perlman and Larissa Marfan in our offices who've helped us put everything together. I also do want to acknowledge the Earth Observation for Government Network as providing a basis for this type of interaction amongst our community as well. Okay. Looking at questions which have come in so far, there's one question from Sebastian, and we might take this one on notice. So we will record everyone's questions and put them in the report that comes along with this. But Sebastian Wong's question, what would a national crop mapping project look like? That's possibly something to come back to towards the end of that. Andrew, is that something that fits into the idea of that the collective and what it might do, or the components of it?
Well, that's why we're all here. I think it's the short answer of that. So, yeah, look, this is why we've tried to bring together everyone who is developing products, as well as a wide range of industry people who are using them to try and cover where to go forward. And there, in that report that Stuart mentioned before, we'll form recommendations based on your feedback and all your respective needs. And hopefully that will develop what the project will look like going forward. Yeah. We do have some, after discussion with quite a few of you over the last couple of weeks, we have some general thoughts on how it may look, but we're not going to be that presumptuous at this stage. We'll wait for everyone's feedback and then make that call. So please ask questions and contribute, because this is your opportunity to do this.
Yeah. And I think Rob Walters is the next one, and it's more of a point than partly a question. And this is actually a discussion point for the group, is the value of putting together, Rob's called it a database of ground truth training data that could be used in conjunction with satellite data, such as stored in Digital Earth Australia. So just to put some context to that and then open it up, I think, to the floor there. Calibration validation is a key focus of our area in Earth observation. Calibration in terms of the development, building and ongoing maintenance of sensors on the ground, aircraft and satellites. So that's a key component. I do want to pull validation out separately. I think the concept of having, I guess, a validation resource where people are able to place data that's collected in a certain way for use is useful. Those of you that have been involved in NCRIS, National Collaborative Research Infrastructure activities, as well as various state and territory government activities, know that there are already online portals for a range of activities where people have collected and continue to collect field survey data according to set protocols. It's stored in a certain way with appropriate metadata and can be accessed for use. If you go overseas, whether it's to Western Europe or North America, Canada, South America, you'll see the concept of test beds in place where people have sites. It could be a horticultural or agricultural site which are instrumented and monitored, or it could be ground sites where the data are collected, where people can come and test new sensors, build new algorithms. All of these ideas I've just mentioned have been combined in national calibration and validation proposals over the last 8 to 10 years. It's been focused a lot on natural environments. There's not a lot on production environments that we've seen in the NCRIS space. Maybe there is more in the horticulture and agriculture and grazing space we haven't seen through national initiatives. But this would be an area, I I think that we could push collectively to establish. It is also one to preempt the Australian Space Agency's focus on Earth observation as a civil space priority. This is one of the areas that they will want to see us develop. And just again, context, the Australian Space Agency isn't about outer space exploration, NASA, etc., even though the agreement is signed today. It is about building Australian industry capability to use space-based information and services. So validation is a critical component of what it wants to invest in. And if we align ourselves on building that capability, it would help government, it will help industry, it will help research. So that was a bit of preamble. I guess there are a number of other comments there about...
Stuart, can I just make one quick comment about, a very short comment about that?
Yep.
I think in this framework, a very short one. People like, I see Tim's mentioned comment there, like he's engaged with, I think the last number he mentioned was 25% of grain growers, and that's at the farm level. So that's an example. Or you've got Phil Tickle with some with coverage with pasture producers as well. You've got very strong calibration data available, working directly with farms to help validate what's coming in. I think there's an opportunity in this discussion where that should be actually worth something. Like if they're providing that information for the greater good to help calibrate and validate each season, then whether, as I mentioned clumsily in the opening slide, if there's an opportunity to monetize that in this greater scheme moving forward, that would be, I think, in everyone's best interest as well.
All right. Thanks, Andrew. And also, as we are moving into a discussion section, if people do want to turn their cameras on, that would be good. If you do want to make a point, chat window, or also put your hand up, and we can go around and do that. So I think just if we could stay on the validation point for a second, I think it does address Tim Neal's point in there, and it's something that would benefit everybody. I think in terms of comment from Nick Schaefer there as well, is trust a concern for users of current products? Actually, Mick, if you're there, could you just talk to that for a second, just to expand it a bit, because I think it does.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I just had a thought as you're going through the limitations and concerns there, Stuart, that, is trust a concern for people when they're looking at different products? There's a lot of different providers out there providing potentially the same product for people. So how do you make the decision that that's the best product for you? And, is it purely the amount of ground truthing data and the quality of that ground truth data that allows you to trust in that product and say, yep, that's the best one for me? Or, I'm just interested to hear people's thoughts around that area and whether that is a concern for people using this type of data.
That is a good discussion point, Mick, and open it up to the floor there, because is validation giving you that trust, or is there something else that defines whether it's fit for purpose there? So interested to hear other comments or other comments typed in as well. I think that does get to partly to Tim's piece, but I think maybe part of it is that, you could have different products for a same application area, same type of crop, and it's going to depend on what people are using that information for. They may favour one over the other for reasons that take into account accuracy and others as well.
I think, Mick, part of that discussion on, again, contributing to one of these base maps that we all contribute to is having a standard on what's expected to be put into it. And that would be developed from that range of approaches. So image analysis, ground truthing, industry engagement, how the number of processes. So that would have to be a part of quality assured for its contribution. And with that process, then there should be an established trust in what people are accessing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess if there's a standard set of frameworks that people are looking at to validate each of the products within Australia, and if it's the same for each one that's available, well, then you've got that level of trust already assured, I suppose. That.
And there was a good question from Rose, just jumped up then, which is a very, very topical one. The trust on the other side of it, not just trust in the data, but trust in what's included and who has access to it. Most of us in this field have dealt with that issue or have come across that issue in the past. And we did mention that the Aussie Farm Maps fiasco years ago, with the very base layer, I think what we would only focus on purely is just this is apple, pear, in context of what you said about farms. That would be it. Our experience with tree crops, a number of tree crops in Australia, is that they're happy as an industry to have that information available. But any yield or productivity information, any grower information, even sale price of properties, they're really quite nervous about. So any of those value add layers on top of this would go along with those industry groups or those commercial groups or government groups who are already working with those industries to ensure that data is protected. It wouldn't be just open slate up, click on this, and there's everything you need to know about that farm. We're very wary of that. And that'll come up a lot tomorrow in the industry discussion as well.
Can we just keep it at focus for a second? Bronwyn, Cole, your question there back to Mick as well. Could you expand on that a little bit? Because I think it opens a couple of other points that Mick and Andrew just touched on, please.
Thanks for the topic and thanks for a great discussion. A question is of Mick's question. What do we like and what do we trust about the companies we use to upload this kind of data? I think the question is also needs to be extended out to the new users, to the mum and dad farmers who never experienced satellite mapping before, and to all the people that just don't trust technology full stop. So I think this question should really be incorporative of, or incorporate two different aspects there, that's all. Is that enough clarification of my question, Stuart? Yeah, I know, thanks, Bronwyn. It dropped in and out there, but I think we got a lot of it there. So it's not just the nature of the data, but it's the group that's producing it and possibly how they're producing it as well, and how that's communicated. And I guess that's sometimes some of that for public access products will be completely open and transparent. But I guess for commercial products, there may be another way of presenting that as well. I think that's an important consideration that we can take on board here. And just conscious of time as well, everyone, and in terms of, we did identify a couple of key points to cover, which are shown in the slide up there, and we're still looking at the survey questions there. I think Phil Tickle, you raised a point there about land management already practices. Land management practice mapping standards should allow multiple organisations to contribute. So Phil, can you just clarify what you're suggesting there? Is you're saying that enabling a way for people to collect information and submit it, not just photos or text-based information?
Yeah, can you hear me okay, Stuart?
Yeah, all good.
Yeah, I think it's just a point there that we've got lots of farm management software systems that are being utilised today that effectively are disconnected to the rest of the sort of the world in a lot of ways. So, when someone does an individual property plan or a farm plan that lays out their fields and their paddocks and so forth, and potentially their commodities that are planted in those particular locations, it's pretty rare to find an application that can then seamlessly roll into something like an update of an ACT clump map. So obviously dealing with all those issues around privacy and so forth, but we've now got people that are wanting to map field boundaries and doing a pretty dodgy job of it, when there's probably a John Deere tractor that's already produced perfect field boundaries for that property that could be shared with others to a standard.
Sure. So that cuts across a range of different potential data sources and supply think, aspects of what we're going to look at later on. So, okay. Any other thoughts, comments on what Phil's just raised there from people?
Only quick, Stuart, while everyone's a little bit quiet. That tomorrow's one has a number of the big ag industries. I'm not sure if John Deere ended up saying coming in, but some of the other big ones are. Definitely what you're saying is an important component of that ground truthing information if it's collected on ground, obviously. So if they're happy to be engaged, then yeah, that's good. And again, some sort of standards into making sure that's right coming into it is of the benefit of all.
All right, we might just move on to the next 2 points there, which relate to each other. So strengths and limitations of current products, and then are there any critical gaps? And so Andrew, just on that second point, is it around, we're talking about the data that's coming into the process to drive the maps, or are we talking about that there's a gap in the supply of a certain map?
This was the opportunity for people who didn't do the survey to add some comment on that.
Okay.
Strengths and limitations. It's about the current products. So there's some really good ones that were brought up before on, who do you trust and data privacy. I mean, that does definitely relate to current projects, current products. So it's more focused on that. And in terms of the gaps, you've got a list of things there like scale and access compatibility. One obvious one is there's a number of industries that aren't yet included in that sort of demographic or coverage. In some instances, the industry bodies themselves are probably short on revenue to funding the national mapping of their commodity. And so I just hope that through this and through this collaborative approach, we're able to pick up all those industries that are interested in being part of it, or we're hoping to pick up all industries, but yeah, get them engaged, but hopefully not have to sit there and shake a can at them.
Right, yeah, so I've put the limitation challenges summary point up there, and I guess, were there any other points there that people think should be highlighted, either from a point of view of industry using this information, or of groups who are producing these products and services, or people who are trying to work out new methods and new data sets. Like, if I can just start the discussion, I think in terms of one of our, I guess, limitations from a teaching and research at a university point of view is getting people focused and interested on this area, or even just aware that there's a lot of work required to build and deliver these, and it's linked to a whole sort of career space. It is still a challenge, and I think if we can sidetrack's wrong word, we want to get people into this area more, it would be very helpful on a range of levels.
Stuart,
any other? Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think one of the challenges here is finding out where the balance is between some of these different players, like the commercial organisations, government, state and federal, and the academics, where we're sort of all playing in the same space but got slightly different aims, and government needs to be careful that we're not stepping on the toes of and taking away the markets of the commercial companies, but at the same time, because in some ways we're trying to, we've got slightly different end goals, where the commercial companies are working to meet the needs of individual farms, whereas government's probably more looking at national and state sort of policy level questions. But thinking about how we can work together to help each other do that is a really important part of this discussion, I think.
Stuart, can I jump in there?
Yeah, go ahead.
That's a really good point. A lot of us, as I said before at the start, have been doing this for a long time, and that's commercial agents, government, and research. not one group can do everything. Like there's so many commodities and so much changing. The resolution from national to regional to individual paddocks, it needs to be a collaborative approach. And as you rightly pointed out, agencies that are mapping national scale do not have the time or the resources to go to every grower and say, can you please update this every year and help us update it? So there is definitely plenty of room for all those current people playing in this space or operating in this space to effectively work together on this without being pushed out.
Can I jump in? Might add a couple of comments here. Matt Miles here from South Australia. I'm from the South Australian government. And look, I think one of the things that can help this part of the discussion is recognising, you know, we know that there's open data requirements at one end of the spectrum that, like Rob's talking about, that the national and policy sort of application ends, and then at the other end of the spectrum, you've got highly detailed, regular products targeting specific crop types, perhaps, and industries at which there's a different business model. There's a costing business model down there, and that speaks to all of those licensing issues and trust issues. But I think there's a need for us to get some language around that spectrum. You know, at the top end, I'll just put a comment in about the national land accounts. You know, we will all benefit from the open collaboration and provision of trusted crop data into the national land accounts. And so that's going to require us to take all of the research that might be, you know, down at the detailed level of certain crop types and plug it into, you know, the alum classifications so that it can pop out in the national land accounts and be part of that sort of national statistical you know, level. So this language around that continuum of, okay, we've got commercial business models down one end all the way through to national open data at the other end, and where is it that people want to participate and find some commonality where we can collaborate. I think there's absolutely furious agreement in the room that collaboration is the way to go. So just thanks for the conversation. This is really great kickoff.
That's great, Matt. Yeah, I think it does, again, reiterate a point that these things are happening. These mapping products are emerging almost weekly by different groups. So it is happening unless we have this discussion on how we can best fit together. And as I said, it's not about doing everything together. This is about one common product that can do as a good high level, base level for lots of uses. If we find common ground on that and how we can all contribute effectively, I think that's a really good outcome. And it really does put Australia way ahead of a lot of other places.
Absolutely.
I'd like to suggest in that vein, then, that the national land accounts and the land use data that is going into the national land accounts, I just put that up as a straw model. You know, why not we aim for that? And I'm interested in people's thoughts around that. I think it provides a really good focus. It's going to be nationally, statistically applied in states, territories, and nationally for policy, you know, use. And yeah, I reckon that's probably not a bad place to start. That would be my suggestion.
Do you have some links to that, Matt, that you could happily share with the group that they could have a look a bit more? We have done a little bit of work in the past with local land services in New South Wales, which did have property identification codes, for example, but there was privacy stipulations around that data and about it being circulated beyond the local land services. So is this slightly different to that?
Yeah, this is national level. So this is under, Stuart's just sent the EEA, the Environmental Economic Accounts link through there. This is about national statistics agencies being able to base environmental economic decisions. It's about getting into the environment and the landscapes and into our you know, measures of GDP and things like that. It's understanding the condition of our natural capital, and clearly industry, you know, and cropping is part of that. So a bit tricky in terms of the timing of this. I'd be very happy to have a conversation about it. There's a whole industry. There's a few people on the line already who are very much part of that that activity. It's being led by DOR and ABS, and part of ABS's role there is to bring that that trusted and sensitive data handling aspect to it, and to recognise that this is about national statistics and not about cutting anyone's lunch at in terms of business models or privacy issues. It's about national data sets, consistent national data sets on what happens where in the country. But very happy to talk about it anytime.
No, that's great, mate. I mean, the establishment of this map, ideally at the end, will serve as an essential base layer to feed into a lot of those stats. And a really nice example of the work with the macadamia industry is they happily touted they were the highest yield per hectare producers in the world, when they actually realised that their estimates of area of production were half. The yield per hectare dropped down drastically. So you can do a lot of stats on it, but you do need that base layer data correct in the first instance to feed into it. So this would be highly complementary to what you're saying.
And I think one of the main challenges here is the fact that you've got production information, and then you've got urban environments, and then you've got natural environments, and we're just looking at that 1/3 of kind of the production environment with the crops. We've got to try and get the alignment right, and that's where the Allen codes come in. I'll stop talking now and let Stuart take control back.
I was going to say Sebastian had his hand up, but I think just before we go to Sebastian, Matt set a good direction there, which we'll come back to for discussion later on as well. Sorry, Sebastian.
Yeah, actually, I'll follow on from what Matt just said, but I can see like the commercial providers potentially providing some level of detail. So I'm Sebastian, I represent Continuum and Gaia today. I can see the commercial providers providing some level of information that then gets rolled into some generic national service. But one of the things I think by doing this is actually a unique world opportunity. Like, we did some world firsts in Australia. Like, we did the first continental mapping of a single crop type at 0.5 metre resolution. There's a lot of really unique capabilities in Australia, which we could actually take to the rest of the world. So I think, like, if we can show what we're doing really well in Australia, pull that all together, there's actually an Australian benefit opportunity to take a new type of offering to the rest of the world.
It's a really good point, Sebastian, and that's, I think, looking at all the talk around potential development of geospatial and what we're doing, and I think it is something that we could help people build in terms of industry for doing things both nationally and internationally as well. And maybe a way coming into the collective model that we'll talk about towards the end of today is, ideally, what does that sort of the continuum look like from appropriate data coming in terms of image and field data being built on and then delivered for use in terms of development work, but then also going into products and services as well. So I think if we can agree on that, that would be really helpful as well. And I think it partly comes back to trying to address some of the other earlier points. I think so. Claire Krause from Geoscience Australia pointed out, there are parallel efforts, and that scale that Matt just talked about, where you've got sort of the open source end of it to develop and share, but how does that then go commercial? And there are ways of building and sharing open source and then taking parts of it and using it commercially and monetizing it as well. So and I think that could be part of the role of this group too, is how do people in this community work across that space as well. So, all right, I'm just noting that we're sort of getting to the end of our discussion block time. And I'm also just checking on the comments that we've addressed and haven't addressed. And thanks, Sebastian, just for flagging that question from. There's a question earlier from Sandy Hathaway about sharing acquisition costs between independent projects. I think that's a really important consideration in terms of what's the fundamental enabling information, which then is delivered in a form that others can then build other products and services from and can be validated. So that is something that we could definitely look at as part of this as well. So Andrew, are you happy for us to go to the next part of today?
Yeah, I think just unless there's any final comments, it was good to have Sebastian, Phil as commercial deliverers of these products have the opportunity to speak. Is there anyone else? I think if any other commercial people there had any comments, because we are very wary that we don't feel that you don't feel like you're being pressured out or stomped on. This is not the intent. So is there any other commercial people there wanting to make a comment? Not? Is Tim still around, or is he gone?
No.
Yeah, mate. What are you expecting me to bloody rip it up, you mate? Are you?
No, not at all. Just a general feel. I mean, you're heavily in the space of grains, as we're all aware, and doing a lot of this direct engagement with growers. So it would be good to have your sort of sentiments on this and thoughts.
Yeah, I think there's still I work with RISI to try and look at some of the land use data sets in the past, and I see this massive chasm between what the accuracy and age of data sets that exist in the public domain versus what we're trying to achieve. Like at a commercial level, is we're delivering products within days of literally days of assessments. It's just this whole. There's still this big gap, I think, and we've got to in the commercial world, we've got to keep on the edge, and we're going to hold things like our ground truth data pretty tightly because that's what the value proposition is, as I've said in there. But we need common data sets in Australia that are actually that everyone can access, that aren't going to interfere with commercial outcomes, and that's not been done well at all. There's massive errors in the publicly available data sets, almost to the point where they're almost quite unusable. So I think that should be the focus in the first instance for the to get those things aligned, and then the commercial world will go about doing its real time type stuff, which government and university sectors will never get into because it's not it's a different sort of level. So that's what I'd like to see working. There's just we don't even know how many hectares of cropping here in Australia right now. Like, it's an embarrassment. We those data sets should be up to date and readily available. And something simple as that is decades, sometimes 10 years old, and it's 2 million hectares out in one state alone. I mean, so I think there's got to be two levels, and that's an easy way to differentiate is, the longer term foundational data sets are put into the public domain, and then the real rapid, stuff is going to be kept very closely in the private sector, because that's where we're generating our revenue. So we're very unlikely to give that away, for the greater good, even though we've done that already. But like, you can see where I'm coming from.
Yeah, totally understand. But in order to develop that accurate one down to the crop level, engagement from all facets is encouraged. But as I was saying before, that if it does involve some of your clients' data in terms of this is a crop and this is a crop, not their productivity or anything like that, that's your own business, but just that location stuff you're collecting, that if you are providing into that, that would be an important consideration within this framework. Like, how are you appropriately, I suppose, again, compensated for that contribution? So you're not underselling that pointy end that you're providing.
Yeah.
And then and hopefully once the maps, once this layer is developed, the benefits to you then to integrate into your own commercial business to build on for however you like, has significant benefit as well. Like, and hopefully it's a two-way street that you see it.
Yeah. So just, sorry to interrupt, just conscious of time as well. I think just bringing that discussion together, if you look at development of a lot of remote sensing applications, it starts, with products that often cover large areas at different scales and are not necessarily accurate, and then progress more and more to become more detailed and progressively more accurate in some areas than others. And I think we all have a role in doing that and enabling it to happen. There's going to be a continual change in what we can access with image data sets, both optical and active data sets, more consistently over the entire country and on a regular basis. So, the ability to deliver a lot of these services is going to keep changing. So, I think we're starting down that path to figure out, how to work together in that area and build on what's been done already, and to make sure there's, we're meeting our sort of end requirements. Okay, just conscious of time and that we went over with our discussion, but that's probably okay because the focus was really hearing from everyone. And I do want to iterate, if the follow-up survey from this, if you feel there was material that we didn't include, providing capability for you to provide input as well. So I think, Andrew, can I hand it to you to go through those 3 points just to finish things off?
Yeah. I mean, as I said at the start, the ability to bring together what's currently happening. I mean, we're all aware there's lots of bits and pieces happening, to be able to tabulate what the current products, what the current producers are, resolutions, all that information that you also kindly contributed is a huge start to bring together. And as Stuart mentioned, those that didn't have a chance to add their information, they're welcome to before we put this, while we're putting this together. I think it does identify a range of benefits, challenges to what's happening to current products at the moment. But I think the general sentiment was that there is keenness, there is a shortfall on what's available today. There is a huge amount of opportunity to build this. There's a huge amount of benefit to not only the agricultural industry in the first instance, but value-adding industries beyond that. There's a huge demand for this. And so the fact that everyone's quite keen to communicate about it and collaborate within this sort of move forward is really encouraging. So if we've missed anything and you haven't felt comfortable in writing any information there, please get back to Stuart, myself, and our supporting legends that are helping us. That would be greatly appreciated, and we'll make sure it's properly included, and everyone get a copy of that report from this workshop. But keep in mind that this was purely just to identify what's out there. Tomorrow it's industry needs, the third day is a framework. So if you go away tonight and think about the discussion today, think about if you've got some ideas on how we can fit this together where, it is mutually beneficial for all in terms of industry, usage, commercial, government, everyone. I really strongly encourage you to bring some ideas forward because we can't report on them if you don't say anything, basically. So that's about it, Stuart.
I mute myself. Thanks very much, Andrew. So that gets us to the end of today. And just to highlight again what Andrew said, we are having a follow-up session tomorrow, which is sort of looking at this in a little bit more detail. And the aim is to basically start that discussion, make us aware of what's going on, what the challenges actually are. I mean, it's not perfect. There is overlap there, but it's also a rapidly changing area. And if we tackle that together, we're going to move forward more effectively as well. So again, I'd just like to thank everybody for your time before today in giving us information on the survey, contributing to the discussion today. And also again to thank Georgia and Larissa for getting this all set up as well. And we look forward to catching up with everyone tomorrow and furthering the discussion. It's been really helpful. We'll talk to you all again soon. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Stuart.
Thanks, everyone.